Want to use a PGR in your cereals but have no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as one tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
I'm Sean Haney, and this is Realag on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. Realag on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to Realag on the Weekend. I'm your host, Sean Haney of RealAgriculture.com. I hope you had yourself a great week. And it's great to be back with you here on this weekend, and looking forward to it to talk about some really important issues on 650 CQM and 980 CGME here today. We're going to hear about that Auditor General report, about really the ineffectiveness of the federal government's climate and sustainability policies relative to agriculture, and they've just not met the mark. It has not been effective. We're going to get to that in a real quick second here. But we're also going to hear today from Nathan Finney of the Canadian Cattle Association on a recent trip that CCA and other groups had to South Korea. There's some significant tariff disadvantages that Canada faces on the export of beef to South Korea in comparison to the U.S. and the United States. We're also going to hear today about, out of the University of Saskatchewan, a new study or report on the impact potentially on farmers when it comes to that Viterra-Bunge merger, or I should say that, the Bunge acquisition of Viterra. Does it mean that this merger doesn't go through? We're going to get some thoughts from myself, Kelvin Helpner, and Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture. We're also going to do a product spotlight today with Bruce Lowe, who is from Ag Direct Hail. And he's got a big announcement today. He made it earlier this week on the Realag Radio podcast, and we're going to play that audio for you again here today as well so you can hear it, because you're going to want to hear it. Cost savings for you when it comes to hail insurance. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms as Real Agriculture, or you can call that Realag feedback line. Now, the number there is 855-776-6147. Let's talk about this Auditor General's report. Scathing, how many have described it to me. And here's the reality. The report provides new details on AFC's implementation of these programs and policies and included the following shortcomings and conclusions. Here's the list. And this is from a story at realagriculture.com, so I encourage you to go there and check it out. But the department had no strategy to meet its expected contributions to reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, no strategy on climate change mitigation for the agricultural sector, program emission reduction contributions toward fertilizer and methane targets not identified. The department had limited results and poor result measurements. Results achieved were limited by delays in program implementation, missing or non-finalized performance targets for climate change mitigation programs, and unreliable and incomplete results measurement, verification, and monitoring of reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Scathing indeed. There has been a lot of discussion about this in ag circles amongst farm groups, other sides of the aisle, of course. How the government reacts to it will be quite fascinating, but not very encouraging if you are somebody that deems climate change very, very important and want to see this government do something about it. Quote here from Agriculture Minister Lawrence MacAulay in regards to the report. He said, "There's no doubt we need to do more to help agriculture sector reduce emissions, and quickly. I am pleased to share that work is well underway to action the recommendations." That was from the Minister of Agriculture. Here's my take, and it's pretty simple, okay? You can look at this report through a number of different angles. I posted an opinion column at realagriculture.com talking about how the idea of carrot-based incentives, although much preferred over a stick, can be very inefficient in terms of driving any sort of adoption and change. And I have some data going back to a study that Real Agri Studies did with CAPI back in March of 2023 on exactly that. So I encourage you to check that out on our website. The other thing I want to point out is I think the government kind of broke the golden rule when it comes to goal setting. We've all heard of SMART goals, right? Specific and measurable. Like, just look up the definition. These are not SMART goals. This is what happens when you put goals on a board and you're really chasing more of the headline than the actual change or any sort of attention to actually achieving that goal. And so what we've seen here is the government being concerned about the outcome, and the outcome's important, okay? Don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have goals when it comes to reducing emissions. Reducing emissions is important. But what our goal is, or the outcome we're looking for, should be somewhat connected to the process. And if we're chasing outcome and not paying attention to the process to achieve that outcome, we're really lost in the woods, so to speak. And this is the disconnect I think that we have. At the farm level, what is practical? That's a key piece. What is practical? What can be done? What is being done? What is the most efficient and cost-effective way to drive that change? And those things seem to be kind of disregarded. There was a clear statement in the report from the Auditor General that farmers weren't even really consulted. That's obviously a concern. Now, farmers aren't one person. There's a lot of diversity of thought in the farming community about what should be done in this regard. And our study with CAPI definitely very, very much identifies that. Not everybody's on the same page. How primarily crop farmers feel about this versus livestock farmers versus east versus west. There are some differences in many different cases. So it's the regional differences and the variability of agriculture that adds an extra layer of complexity to all this that should not be forgotten and we need to make sure that we are recognizing it. I think that is the key. But when it comes to putting goals on a board, whether that's business goals or that's regulatory goals related to, or programming goals related to, in this example, reducing emissions and the adoption of climate-smart agriculture practices, there needs to be more attention paid to less about the outcome and more to the process of how we get to those points in a very, very effective manner. And so let this be a case study for you in terms of your own farm business. Don't set goals like what we have seen in this example. Pay attention to the process of what you're going to do. What do you need to do today, tomorrow, and this week in order to enhance the probability that you're actually able to achieve that goal at the end of the day? We see this in sports like in baseball. It's focusing on what in terms of this next at bat, what do I need to do in order to give myself a chance of succeeding? Raise the probability I'm going to have success. Success isn't guaranteed, but the opportunity to succeed is. That I know. So this is a real mess for the government. We'll see how they respond, and if they respond, is there any change? But from a farmer's perspective, maybe it worked out for the best that the government failed in this manner, because had they gone to the full extent of trying to achieve some of those lofty, out-of-reach goals that they had set, it would have been very prescriptive, very top-down, and may have really, really hurt your ability to have success at the farm gate. Some of your thoughts, shaney@realagriculture.com. Very interested in what you have to say about that. When we come back, we're going to talk about a pretty controversial issue in Saskatchewan. I've been hearing from you, the audience. We're going to talk about the Bunge acquisition of Viterra. New report out from the University of Saskatchewan, not very complimentary to the idea. We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to Realag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM, 980 CJME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Want to use a PGR in your cereals but no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as 1 tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging risk, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
We saw a report out of the University of Saskatchewan this week, and we posted that story at realagriculture.com. If you thought the Competition Bureau last week was negative on this acquisition of Viterra by Bunge, wait till you see the U of S report. On the Realag Radio podcast on Friday, I discussed this issue with my colleagues at Real Agriculture, Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith, and this is what the group had to say. Okay, Sean Haney, joined by Lindsay Smith, Kelvin Hepner. Let's hit on Viterra Bunge. We had a report of the U of S, right? Is that correct, Kelvin?
That's right. Yeah.
If you thought the Competition Bureau was negative about the potential acquisition, let me present to you what the U of S thought.
Yeah, exactly. The researchers at the University of Saskatchewan, so three professors there, have completed a report that was done with support from the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, or APAS, Alberta Grains, Sask Barley, and Sask Wheat. So farm groups were involved in this report, and they found that Bunge's proposed acquisition of Viterra could result in more than $700 million in annual economic losses to farmers, with a large percentage of that due to consolidation at the Port of Vancouver. And this is where there were some assumptions made, and I think this is where Bunge has pushed back on this report in terms of a spokesperson reaching out to us saying that these assumptions, in their opinion, weren't all accurate. That's because Bunge already owns a 25% stake in G3, which is the largest port terminal in Vancouver. That's the new one that was just built a couple of years ago. Meanwhile, Viterra is already the largest grain shipper through Vancouver. And so the researchers at the University of Saskatchewan treated this as a single entity, that G3 and Bunge owning Viterra would operate as a single entity. That's where Bunge has pushed back on this. There's also $200 to $250 million in estimated losses to farmers annually from canola crush consolidation and the disincentive that this company, Bunge, would have to building that proposed Viterra crush facility in Regina. And then they also added some losses to farmers due to reduced competition, especially in parts of Alberta. There's a couple small areas where they would go from having 2 to only 1 grain buying company within 100 kilometers. Again, assuming that Bunge's 25% stake in G3 influences how G3 acts. And so that's where a lot of this comes down to: how significant is that 25% stake that Bunge holds in G3? And so be interesting to see. The transport minister, of course, has until June 2nd to make his decision on whether this deal will go ahead and what kind of strings will be attached or conditions applied to it.
What's this group's bet on what happens? What do you think?
That's a tough one. I do think it goes forward. But like any other deal of this magnitude, there's usually some sort of list of demands, right? That in order for it to go forward, you have to liquidate this or spin off that, to try and level that playing field a little bit more. So I do think it goes forward, but I think, and don't ask me right now what I think is going to have to be changed. But yeah, I think, like, looking at the report that was done, I think they bring up some really good points, but I also think that it is sort of taking the most extreme sort of view of how bad it could be. And I don't know if that is necessarily realistic, in which case, the actual cost is probably not nearly what that is, because should it go through, I think there will be concessions on, what
Right.
Bunge has to do to make it actually happen.
This is kind of a reality, I think, right now in the sector, though. Like this is, if it's not this one, it's going to be the next one.
Yeah, we are in for a period. So there's a couple opposing factors at play here. We're in for a period, I think, of thinner margins as well on the grain company side of things. I know farmers we're seeing that and on the horizon, and I think grain companies are bracing for that as well. So I think there will be some more consolidation pressure in the grain industry in the coming years. But at the same time, socially and politically, we're in a period right now where anti-consolidation and anti-monopoly movement is quite strong. Look at the Biden administration's efforts there and what they're trying to do in the meatpacking industry over the last number of years. The Canadian government and the competition commissioner here in Canada have shown kind of the same leanings and perspective over the last number of years. And so that's where I think this gets interesting. I do, and could be potentially harder to get across the finish line than it would have been 3, 5, 10 years ago. I think I'm with Lindsay, though, where I think that this deal is allowed to go ahead, but there will be some significant sell-offs or divestitures that has to happen here. And whether Bunge has to sell their 25% stake in G3 to make it a fully Saudi-owned company. Of course, the Saudis own the other 75% of G3. That could be one of the things. I could see a canola crush plant, especially one here in Manitoba, potentially changing hands. This is all speculation, but I think they're going to have a tough time blocking it completely, but there could be some harsh or pretty stringent conditions attached to it.
Yeah, Lindsay?
How about you, Sean?
No, I want to know, is Sean the tiebreaker, or are we all?
No.
We're both.
I think it goes ahead.
Might be unanimous.
Yeah, it's unanimous. Never mind.
So I do. And one thing that concession that hasn't been mentioned here is guaranteeing a certain amount of jobs stay in Regina. Is an economic piece of that too. So, I just think this is kind of the reality right now.
Another area where we're going to see this rubber hit the road if this deal goes through is in our farm groups and commodity organizations. Viterra has a presence on several national industry associations, and from what I know about Bunge's culture, and again with cost cutting and consolidation happening in the grain industry, I'm curious whether the same dollar amount continues to flow into some of these groups like Cereals Canada or a Canada Grains Council.
Yeah, honestly, so that is a whole part of a whole big umbrella discussion. Funding of not only nonprofit organizations, but also some of the farm group models. There is a huge constriction and budget cutting happening in the industry because of the commodity pullback, not just impacting farmers, but impacting the industry. And when it comes to the funding and contributions to certain things, and the more and more that those dollars are not centralized and controlled inside the confines of Canada, the more risk it is that funding becomes a major issue, and that is a reality right now in many ways. That audio was from the Realag Radio podcast on Friday. You can get the Realag Radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So you heard our discussion there on this issue. And like I said, I do believe this is going to happen. Right or wrong, I do believe also that some of the barriers, the hang-ups can be, like in most mergers and acquisitions, it's a shedding of certain assets. And we saw this with Bayer's acquisition of Monsanto. This is how BSF got control of the Invigor hybrid canola portfolio, was because Bayer had to spin it off, right? So we don't know what some of those recommendations will be in the spinoff. Does the government say no? Does the transport minister say, hey, no way, this is not happening, period? I don't see that, but like Kelvin had pointed out, there is some winds of change when it comes to how, in Canada and in the U.S., how they feel about this. We have not yet seen the FTC rule give their opinion south of the border, so that's yet to come as well. That'll come with a heavy opinion as well. I want to hear from you on this. Okay, I do know that 70% of Western Canadian farmers that told Real Agri Studies that they believe this merger should not go through. Period. 70%. We've talked about that in this show before. But I know some of you do feel it should go through. Send me your thoughts. shaney@realagriculture.com. Do you believe that this merger should be stopped? Do you believe this merger should be allowed to go ahead, or I should say acquisition maybe is the better way to describe it? And the why. I want to hear your why. Why do you feel that way? S. Haney at realagriculture.com. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Bruce Lowe at Ag Direct Hail. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend, 650 CQM and 980 CJME. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The following is a paid product spotlight by Ag Direct Hail. Bruce, Ag Direct Hail has become a real household name in the crop hail insurance industry over the past decade. Time flies for sure. What makes you different from some of the other crop hail insurance companies that are out there?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, Sean. When we first started this thing going back just over 10 years ago, our focus was we wanted to save hardworking prairie farmers money on their crop hail insurance. And we looked at the model. Really, there was one cost that farmers pay that we thought that we can eliminate, and that's the broker cost. If you use a broker to buy your purchase your crop hail insurance, the time you're spending upwards of 8 or 10% of your premium dollar going to the broker in the form of commission. So we set up an online model where farmers can go directly to our website, purchase directly from Ag Direct. We are a private line company, just like our competitors that they are probably used to buying. And at the time, our rates were in that 10 to 15% lower than the industry. And that was welcome news for farmers, because let's face it, the farmers face a lot of costs and input costs, and they thought if they can save money by doing the purchase themselves online, why not? Now, fast forward, we're not the only one doing it anymore, which, you talk about imitation being the best form of flattery. We're completely okay with that, because we think we have other strengths that we'll get into in a little bit, that being our compelling customer service and certainly our claims handling, in my opinion, is second to none.
Well, and you got a big announcement today. This is something I've been waiting for. You had sort of teased it to me a little over a month ago, and today you can talk about it. So what's the big announcement?
Today's the day. We are pleased and thrilled, Sean, to when we looked at what farmers are facing this day, this year in particular, with some of the lower commodity prices, higher interest rates, we said, what can we do at Ag Direct Hail? And we got support right up and down to do a complete 2024 rate hold. And what that means is farmers that purchase Ag Direct will be buying at 2023 rates or less. We did not raise a single rate in over 8,500 townships across the prairies this year, whether or not you had hail. And let's face it, farmers know, kiss of death, you have hail, oh, there goes my rates, or my neighbor has hail, there goes my rates. Not this year. We're holding rates at 2023 levels.
That's pretty big news. There you go. Okay, that's great. I'm sure that's going to make the audience pretty happy and interested in what Ag Direct Hail has to offer. Now, obviously, when it comes to hail insurance, price is important. That is a component of the where you're purchasing from. So you got that taken care of. Obviously, those are very competitive rates you're talking about there. What are some of the other things that need to be considered when you're picking your provider?
Gosh, you're intuitive, Sean. There's no question. Race is just a door opener. And we measure ourselves not just about the race, but we measure ourselves at the end of every season on our customer service and our claims handling, our ease of purchase online, and we consistently rank in the 90+% of customer satisfaction. So when we look at, someone wants to buy coverage and it's 11:30 at night and they need coverage on before midnight to have their policy on for noon the following day and there's stormy weather forecasted, possible thunderstorms, hail the next afternoon. And for some reason, their credit card doesn't want to go through, or some reason they have a question about their coverage or a deductible question, they can call our toll-free line. Someone's going to pick up that phone and someone's going to help them. They have hail. Wow, what next? They file a claim online. Our claims team is in constant contact with them. They know exactly where they are in the process. And I believe that not only do we have the best claims manager and claims coordinator on the prairies, but our team of adjusters are men and women that are dedicated to doing a thorough job. They're extremely knowledgeable, credited loss adjusters. And we say it every time. I have one message to our adjuster. You put a check in that farmer's hand that fairly represents their loss. That's the end of the story. Every one of us has to sleep at Ag Direct. And I sleep well at night knowing, as our claims manager does, knowing that we've treated the farmer fairly. We've now in 11, this is our 11th season, in 10 seasons, we've probably done, I'm going to ballpark in around 7,000 claims. If a farmer's not happy with our adjustment, they can take it to arbitration, Sean. And in those 7,000 plus claims, we've had 5 customers that refused to sign a proof of loss and took us to arbitration. That's quite an astounding record from my perspective. And that speaks volume to the team we have and what we're trying to do for our hardworking prairie farmers.
Yeah. So Bruce, if somebody wants more information about Ag Direct Hail, or they want to figure out maybe what their rate would be, where do they go?
Well, as you know, the rates I mentioned pre-show that the rates are available starting next week. We have a lot of farmers across the prairies have registered, which simply means setting up an email and a password, and that gives them the opportunity to log on and check rates and apply for coverage when they're ready. If they haven't done that, call us toll-free, 1-855-686-5596, or Google Ag Direct Hail. Click on the website and you'll see that I'm a visitor or I'm a returning customer. Click on a visitor, set up an email and a password, and call us if you need a hand. But again, the website is so completely easy and intuitive to use, but we're there if they need us.
Great stuff. Hey, Bruce, thanks a lot for joining us here today on Real Ag Radio for this product spotlight.
Appreciate everything you do for hardworking farmers right across the prairie, Sean. You and your team are amazing over there at Real Ag. Thank you.
When we come back here on Real Ag on the Weekend, we're going to hear from Nathan Finney. He is president of the Canadian Cattle Association. He's fresh off a trade mission to South Korea, very important market for Canadian beef exports. But we're facing some hurdles there, some barriers. We have a tariff disadvantage. He'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend with Sean Haney here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
And we are going to talk about what's going on in the world of the beef industry. Lots to chat about here, including a fresh off a trip to South Korea on a trade mission. We're talking to Nathan Finney. He is president of the Canadian Cattle Association based out of New Brunswick. How's it going today, Nathan?
Great, Sean. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing good. Okay, so you just got back from South Korea. You were yourself, Jennifer Babcock from CCA, and I'm assuming some of the others in some of the associations were in South Korea. A very important market for Canadian proteins. You went along with Trade Minister Ng. What's your takeaway from the trip?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, we had all stakeholders there from the beef industry. Canada Beef was there. President Eric Bienvenue, he was there as well as YG, who was based out of South Korea for Canada Beef. It's a market that we have, as an industry, have wanted more than what we're getting for a long time. It's been on our wish list. We see the value in it, and I think they really see the value and desire our Canadian product. And we were there to help showcase it and let them know that we're willing to do whatever we need to help facilitate getting more product over there.
Well, what's preventing us from getting more product over there?
It's not the desire, I can tell you that. We met with some retailers and some restaurant chain owners, and they love our product. They love, how Canadian beef is well marbled. They love, the food safety that comes with it. But the biggest issue right now that we're dealing with is when we signed our bilateral agreement some years ago, we were at a very, very high tariff rate, and that's eventually going to phase out over time down to zero. But right now, the U.S. has an 8% tariff advantage over us, and Australia has right around 5%. So cheaper product just because of the tariff rate is the reasons why there's more of the U.S. and Australia taking up the marketplace than it is the Canadian beef.
So what needs to be done to lower those tariff rates for Canadian product going into South Korea?
Yeah, so that was the reason why we were over there, mainly to, CCA was with Trade Minister Ng, was to talk about that and hear from, importers and retailers and wholesalers that want our product and more of it, but that being the main issue. So, I think that's something that we continue to push on. I know the agreements are signed and binding, but we also saw a couple of years ago those tariff rates, just due to food security reasons around COVID, they dropped them down to zero, and our shipments went up 165% during that small time. Then they were put back in place, the year after, and we started to see the decline again from that high. So we're going to continue to work diligently on, trying to get those down quicker to match the U.S. would be ideal, so that we can build these relationships, we can get the markets established, and go in there with a level playing field.
Does the U.S. have the advantage on tariffs? I can't remember. Did they negotiate a bilateral agreement directly with South Korea to get to those rates?
They did, yeah. So the U.S. has a bilateral agreement, Canada has a bilateral agreement, as does Australia. And right now, the U.S. it comes down by 2.3% a year. The U.S. is at 8% currently, and Canada is at 16% as of this year. So you can see the difference just in the costing of that, and that's what we consistently heard. So the door wasn't shut. I think there's opportunity there to align ourselves and go that route. One thing that with this Asian Indo-Pacific market, it's all relationship building. So if you can build those solid foundational relationships with, between the suppliers and the industry back here, that goes a long way. So what we're saying is we need to be there at the table, a lot with the U.S. at the same time, and building these relationships, because they'll serve you well going forward.
Curious if some of those processors or the retail chains in South Korea brought up what's happening regarding HPAI and dairy cattle, and whether that worked its way into some of your beef trade discussions over there.
Yeah, no, it didn't come up at all over there. It's predominantly being found in milk in the U.S. right now, and as we're following it very, very closely, it hasn't been detected or found in beef industries. So, we as an industry are continuing to work with CFIA and staying, in daily, if not hourly, contact with our counterpart NCBA and the USDA, staying on top of this and monitoring it. And I think just like everything, you're learning more as you go. But right now, everything is not a health issue, and so we're just trying to make sure everything's mitigated, and continue to keep these industries as strong as possible.
When you are having those conversations with CFIA, what's your messaging to them? Is CCA comfortable with the level of surveillance? What level of surveillance is in place, or what's the ask?
No, and I mean, as it turns out, or it seems from USDA right now, it's not animal-to-animal transmission. So, we're continuing to monitor. There were states that monitored beef herds around some of these dairy herds, and there was no detection found. Ultimately, avian influenza seems to be certain times of year that it is at a certain high, and that happens a lot of the time when the migration is going on with migratory birds. So, if it's an airborne pathogen or a virus, you've got however many hundreds of millions of ducks and geese, migratory birds coming back and forth across the border. So we can stay diligent on the ground and make sure we're monitoring that. But, it's like any other virus, it has many ways it can travel. So we're going to continue to work with them and monitor our industries and ensure that everything's on the up and up and safe for everything moving forward.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but I think there's like 3,600 dairy animals that came north out of the U.S. into Canada in 2023. We know that there is a tremendous amount of animal flow back and forth, integrated value chain in the beef sector. So working country to country, it kind of reminds me a little bit of ASF, right? And some of the proactive work that was done there between Canada and the U.S. That's the kind of cooperation that we need. So it's good to hear that is happening.
Yes.
On another point, next week, or maybe later this week, you're headed to Mexico. There's no rest for the wicked when you're in Nathan Finney's position. So what's the point of the mission to Mexico?
So it's CNOG's annual meeting in Hermosillo. So we'll be going down with the U.S. NCBA and CCA will be going there, and we'll have a trilateral meeting set up. It's a pretty chock-full agenda, but one of the first things that's on the agenda that will be discussed is the voluntary product to U.S. We know it's in place, and we know that it's coming into force in January of 26. But both Mexico and Canada are reiterating to the U.S. that we're not enthused about the passing of that, and that we're going to continue to monitor. And a lot of pre-work is going to go into the next year and a half, working towards a smooth review of the CUSMA deal. The work doesn't begin the day that the deal's up for review. So we're gonna continue to push forward and work and try to make sure that our largest trading partner, the borders stay open and we have free and flowing trade like we've all experienced and what both sides of the border need to have.
That was Nathan Finney, a portion of our discussion from earlier this week. He is the president of the Canadian Cattle Association. That July 1st, 2026 date carries a lot of weight. Very important date. That's the date that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada will have to declare how they want to proceed with the CUSMA USMCA agreement going forward. That is a heavy day when it comes to Canadian trade. Of course, Nathan and other Canadian cattle officials off to a trilateral meeting also here in a couple weeks to Mexico. So lots of trade discussions happening right now. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Make sure you go to realagriculture.com here when you got some spare time to get all caught up on what's happening in the world of agriculture. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for Realag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.